Hopefully you guys enjoyed that intro as much as we enjoyed making it. I finally decided to pick up a Losi Promoto, and I probably should have just bought one right away, but I really wanted to try it first. Well, I got tired of waiting, so I just had to get one for myself. Unfortunately, the tracks at home were too muddy, but we were headed on a trip down south, so I found a couple different spots to test it out. We are in Oklahoma at a place called Chandler Park, and there is a bit of a track here. It's a little more than an oval. It's flat, but it actually works pretty well with the bike. We just did a couple motos and gonna do some more. And here we go. It's actually surprising how much fun it is on such a basic track, but the dirt's pretty good. A little bit soft, dry in some places, but you can get some roost going and see that dirt fly like a real bike. Makes it even more fun. That corner actually has a bit of roughness to it, so it's been a little tricky to find the good line. I'm definitely still learning and having a lot of fun trying to figure out what works best. It's different than a car for sure. You want to try to brake before the corner, start leaning, and then throttle out of it a lot of times. But lots of different techniques that work. This is probably a good place to start with it, being flat. You don't have to worry too much about being perfectly square for any jumps or timing those, so a lot to learn, and a lot of time can be spent on a track like this, getting used to it. Mixing it up now and going the other direction. Got a bit of a downhill into this corner. Brake on the way down, gas on the way out. It does feel like the suspension is a little bit stiff even for this little bit of roughness. Bounces the whole bike around quite a bit instead of soaking it up, so I think going to a lighter spring, probably front and rear, but definitely rear would help that. Some lighter oil as well, but running it box stock for now. It's Hannah's turn now. She has not driven it as much as I have, that is for sure, but this should be a good first place to start for a track. She's just kind of driven it around in the open. But now we have some trees to dodge and some turns to follow, so it'll be a better test to see how much she likes it. What do you think so far?
A little bit different than the RC car. I would say harder to control throughout the corners, but I'm getting used to it. I think it's a lot of fun. Woo! It's my biggest struggle is that corner.
Seems like the little lean balls end up catching in rough spots, so it might be better to go to a bar there. Might try that in the future. See if it slides a little better instead of catching and upsetting the bike.
I'm also finding the faster you go sometimes, the easier it is to control.
Yep, if you go too slow, then it wants to wobble back and forth, can't quite hold balance, and it's hard to go exactly where you want to. So if you just come out of the corner, get on the gas, it will straighten out and probably go more closely to where you want to go. Well, she's definitely getting a lot better because the first battery, she was struggling to string more than a couple laps together. Now she's just hammering out a moto. Well, we're out of battery. Ended up going through 4 6,000 milliamp packs and only getting a little over 10 minutes out of them, and that's actually running them lower than I like to, so might have to get some bigger ones to get some longer run times because it's so much fun. Even on a flat track like this, it's a blast. I could keep doing motos, so we'll be back for some more somewhere else. We ended up going from something very easy to drive to something much harder. This is the St. Louis Dirt Burners track, and it is 8 scale sized, which was great, but some of the jumps were not. It seemed like the takeoffs were just a little too flat and did not pop you up high enough. Even with an 8 scale buggy, it was a challenge to find enough speed to clear them, and then it was hard to slow down for the corners consistently because you had to hit the jumps so fast. Besides the triple in the middle, that is, that one kicked you pretty well. That was probably due to the fact that this layout had been sitting all winter without a ton of maintenance. They were actually planning on closing it down to rebuild it shortly after we were there, so I guess we will have to go back. It is an awesome facility that is free to run when they aren't racing or working on it, so it's definitely worth checking out. The conditions weren't perfect either. It was dry and hard packed with loose dirt over the top in some places, making it difficult to find traction. That said, I really enjoyed the challenge and felt like I got better throughout the day. This was not my best run, but hopefully it shows a little bit of what you might expect when you run at a track like this for the first time. This kid picked me up so much that I gave him $5 as a tip before we left. It was always a challenge to get going again because I never knew which direction I was going to be set down, and a little push can really help, but I was just happy that someone was out there. Since the motor is sensorless and cogs a little bit, it can be hard to take off from a dead stop. If you don't give it enough, it might stutter and go left or right, but if you give it too much and you have traction, it might want to wheelie. I quickly realized that hitting the jump square with the rider as straight up and down as possible was definitely the best bet, but it was a challenge to do every time. This corner here, I didn't turn quite enough, end up hitting this at an angle, getting kicked sideways and crashing. Luckily, I was able to pull out of this one, but it was always difficult to get going again once I made a mistake like that. This double-double was awesome when it worked, but it wasn't easy, so I'll talk more about that later. These next 2 jumps I only tried once and could tell there was no chance. They just did not kick the bike up high enough, and it was hard to get enough speed, so I decided to roll them the rest of the time. It was actually more tricky to roll jumps than I expected, because if you went a little too fast, you would case into the landing, and if you went too slow, the bike would start to lean and turn, and it was hard to pull back straight. There was quite a bit of wobble in the corners on this run, and that might have been due to the lack of traction, rough conditions, suspension setup, and what I found out later was that the lean bar wheels were really tight and not spinning freely. I did turn the lean angle adjustment down for the next run, and it was a bit better, but maybe I was just driving better. I will have to do some testing and tuning to find out. I definitely struggled to string multiple laps together during this run, and I had a lot less crashes in the next one, so maybe it was just the camera pressure that got to me. Either way, I could tell that this bike has a ton of potential. With a little bit of tuning and the right track, it's going to be even more awesome. Even with the struggles, I was having a blast. Years ago, I had the Venom bike, and while it was fun to mess around with, I don't really remember being able to put laps together with it, and I didn't feel like it was very raceable, but with this one, I think there's a much better chance of having some good racing. I made a little mistake here by coming up short on this double, and I thought I saved it about 5 times, but since you can't just slow down and reset like a car, one mistake can lead to many. Now let's check out some slow motion. I really love the way this thing slows down for corners, the way you brake and start to lean it over before eyeing up the exit and throttling out of it, sometimes even locking up or sliding the rear tire sideways a little bit. It almost feels like the real thing. The front brake is pretty weak, so I might change some things to try to find some more power, mostly because I want to do nose wheelies, but it will be interesting to see how it changes things on the track. I'm going to order some different springs as well to start testing those. Here is a better look at the wobble, and I really want to figure out how to minimize this because it can make corner exit a lot more difficult. Sometimes you can throttle out of it, other times you have to counter steer, but when the bike stays more planted, like it did a better job of in this corner, it's a whole lot easier. I never tried the triple here because I didn't think that I would be able to slow down for the corner, but going double single and landing on the brakes was actually a lot of fun. This double-double was also a lot of fun, but it was a lot more challenging. You had to go outside to get enough speed to clear the first one, but if you went too far out, it was pretty loose, so you might lose traction. Braking in the air to rotate the bike forward was key, but only if you hit the sweet spot. If you hit the first one good enough, you did not need full power for the second one, which led to some over-jumping. But when you hit the downside and landed on the brakes to set up for the corner, it was an awesome feeling. Little things like this are probably what is going to keep me wanting to dial in the bike more and get better with it. Just watching this video back makes me want to get out there again. I would say the biggest downside that I've found so far is runtime. Having that flywheel motor going definitely drains more battery, but it is essential for performance. It's worth it though. I had not put a ton of batteries through it at this point, but it had been holding up pretty well. Besides a ripped jersey, some worn out graphics, and a chain that had stretched enough to need the longest adjustment, nothing had actually broken. I'm sure I will break some things eventually though, because I'm planning on running this bike a whole lot more. I'm building a track at home just for it, and it is already working a lot better than this one did, so stay tuned for that. I'm also getting more and more used to how it handles, so I'm looking forward to going back to a track like this to see how much better I can do. Maybe Hannah will be ready for it then too. I didn't even have her try it here because I thought the difficulty might get a little too frustrating for her, and I wanted to use all the batteries myself. Okay, I know that sounded a little selfish, but I know that this thing takes a lot of practice. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you have anything specific that you want to see on this bike, or if you have any tips for me. Thanks for watching.